Good afternoon, Quasar Markets Live. I have a special one for you today. It's Kim and Curtin. Aloha, Kim. I think you're in Hawaii. Is that right?
It's true, Steve. Aloha to you too. Great to be here.
Oh, thank you so much. I think one of the cool things about working on Wall Street and being around as yourself for many, many years is that there are a lot of good people here on Wall Street. And,
There are.
it's very tough a lot of times to get in that straight mindset of how to trade and what to do. Tell us a little bit about who you are, where you came from, and what you're doing now.
Yeah. So I've been coaching traders, investors, and executives for the past 18 years. I myself was working at one of the world's largest hedge funds when I hired a coach. It was life-changing for me, and I felt very much called to become a coach. So that was 19 years ago. And then prior to that, I was on Wall Street for almost a decade. So that's almost 28, 29 years now. I think I have this affinity for this cohort because I've been in it so long. I know how hard it is. I know how much pressure there is. So I have a lot of empathy for what that lifestyle is, whether you're trading your own money or an organization's money. And I just like to give tools to those I work with that facilitate their emotional intelligence so they can become the best version of themselves and not self-sabotage as much as some might.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard as a trader to start out. I mean, I started out like they always say, graph paper and pen. And gosh, I was a young kid when I first started out and lost lots of money, and I couldn't get myself in that mindset. And I think the world has changed a lot since then. Obviously,
Yeah.
tell us a little bit. How do you get? Let's put it this way: how do you get those new retail traders and that new mindset that's now happening? How do you get them started?
I think it begins with them being conscious of how they show up in their life. So a lot of times traders think, oh, I'm going to show up a certain way when I trade. But what I will say to them is you already have indicators in your personal life and how you deal with stress that are going to be little bit of red flags that they could potentially cost you as a trader. If you get, if you never can lose a poker game, if you get ticked off if somebody passes you in traffic, look for the places where you have your triggers right from the get-go so that you can realize, oh, these could be places I have an Achilles heel when I'm working as a trader.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think you hit the nail on the head for my wife. She gets mad when someone passes her in traffic, and I think for me, that's right. Is actually calming that self-centered side of you to say, hey, look, okay, you bought NVIDIA calls here, but you know what? You did it for a reason, right? And
That's
how
right.
do you protect yourself from all those outside influences?
I think it becomes truly a practice that one has to start as early as possible. And part of that practice includes recognizing that the inner critic or that inner monster of the mind will have a tendency to always make you feel bad about yourself and to not be sucked into that inner criticism. And it doesn't mean that you won't be honest with yourself, but if you're always hearing a voice that uses words like you should have, you could have, you would have if you'd done better, those are going to kind of slowly demoralize you, wear you down like water dripping on a rock. So what I first advise is for almost everyone who works with me to review a book called Taming Your Gremlin by Rick Carson. And that book specifically speaks to what he calls an inner critic, an inner gremlin. Once you begin to distinguish your own self-talk from that voice, you have a lot more discipline to stay true to things and see the big picture. But it takes practice.
And I like that too. And I have to ask from your own perspective, how did you get into this, saying that this is the thing that I'm actually going to do? I really want to help people. I've been on Wall Street, but all the things I've seen, I'm going to put this into something. What did you do?
I have to speak to the fact that I had a very volatile youth. My childhood
Hmm.
was very challenging. And so at a very young age, 10 years old, I requested my parents get me a therapist because
Okay.
I was like, I need some tools to navigate what I was experiencing. And those tools, while they were, helpful over the years, when I hired a coach, the coaching experience I found way more fast moving and profound than I had found therapy. And the coach that I hired used a particular style. It's called coactive coaching. That is what, when I started experiencing it, it was like a lightning bolt. Joe Campbell, the great mythologist, talks about finding your bliss. I had been searching for it for decades. I loved what I did on Wall Street. I was being strategic. I was well compensated, but it didn't feel like the bliss. When I first experienced coaching, I surely just had this thunderbolt. This is the bliss. And I
Hmm.
started coaching immediately after that, just with those in my circle. And I could see, oh, this is what I'm born to do. And I'm not, going to lie, I'm very good at it. And I see what
Good.
people do in their one conversation with me. So that has given me the confidence over the years that this is exactly what I'm meant to do. So it feels great to have collected tools for my own journey, my own healing path, so to speak.
Right.
And now I've got like a Sears Master Craftsman set that could rival anybody's garage. What am I going to do with it? I got to share those tools with everybody else because I've seen them work for myself and 18 years worth of clients.
Yeah, and I think that the cool part about that taming that inside that gremlin you said, you went to where? Where are you living at now,
I'm
Kim?
living in Hawaii on a big island, and I'm from Brooklyn. So this was not something I could have even imagined for myself. But I had an opportunity when I was writing my book, Transforming Wall Street, which, had a lot of inner critics telling me I couldn't do it and external critics because I wanted to feature the good guys of Wall Street. And I wish I knew you back then, Steve. You'd have been in the book. But I
Oh,
wanted to show we only were hearing about the bad guys back in 2014 2013 12 after the OA crisis, and I knew such good ones. I had worked for such good ones, so I was like, let's have the good guys come forward. And that book just took a year and a half of interviews. I interviewed over 90 Wall Streeters, and I had to put it together. And a friend who heard about this told me about a house sitting opportunity in Hawaii. So it just started with me coming to put the book together. And, here I am 12 years later.
hey, I love this stuff. I think that's exactly why we built Quasar Markets too, right? Was to build that ecosystem around the quality, as I always say, not just the quantity, because there's lots of quantity of everything out there, right?
There.
Especially on Wall Street. I have to ask, did you work at Wall Street yourself?
I did. I worked there for almost a decade. I was in banking and finance for the first 6 years. And then I was working in hedge funds for the last handful of years. And the hedge fund that I was at, I actually hired the coach while there
Mm.
and was experienced at the coaching. In fact, I sat next to the trading desk. So, I saw the volatility, the pressure, the long hours, just that sense of work ethic that was so required, plus just the emotional volatility. It's very stressful. And I was under tremendous stress. I remember having to check everything I did 4 or 5 times because in finance, everything is expected to be perfect the first time you get those second
That's
chances.
right. And I have to ask, I mean, the pressure cooker that we call it, the boiler room in a lot of ways, there is a lot of pressure, a lot of stress. And I hear my father all this time in my head right now, kids these days, right? Do you feel like the ones that are coming up now, do they have the same work ethic that you and I did?
I think the ones who have the work ethic are the same ones who are more self aware that they need to have tools around their mindset. But I do think there is a little bit of a disconnect, probably because of their parents being misinformed about wanting them to have things maybe better than they had it when they were kids. That sense of grit, I don't see as strong as I think our generation has. The grit comes from disappointment. The grit comes
Mm.
from a certain level of being with discomfort and learning how to stomach it. So I feel almost like the 20-year-olds have it, whereas the 30-year-olds perhaps not as much, because they were kind of withdrawn from that grit. I think their parents, perhaps our age, meant well, but I think what happened is the pendulum went from one extreme to another. When I was a kid, I was on my own all day around my whole neighborhood. You're lucky if you had a sandwich at your friend's mom's house, but you became self-reliant when
Mhm.
friends, got mad at you or your bike got stolen, whatever. That didn't quite happen for some of the generations after us, and I think they've started to wake up to it themselves, but it's a bit of an uphill climb to develop grit at a later age. So
And
don't be
say
afraid.
I was a latchkey kid in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
how did you get to Wall Street? I mean, I get it. You're in Brooklyn, but how'd you get down there to the Fight Eye?
I'll tell you, I was working at Borders Books and Music. It was a bookstore. I was the assistant manager. And I read Investment Biker by Jim Rogers.
Sure.
And when I read that book, first of all, I was like, wait a minute, this is a cool industry. And then second of all, I thought, I think that's some place where I can make the most money.
There you go.
So I looked, literally, this was back in the day, in the New York Times, hard copy, and found a want ad for a banking firm that was looking for an executive assistant to the CEO. And that's how I got my first position. It's
And
crazy.
then you watch the CEO of this bank, and you start to see the traders around you. And is that how you moved up the step? Like, I want to do that.
I didn't feel called to become a trader. I felt called to be kind of the strategic person who was help coordinating everything. So I was the executive and personal assistant, chief of staff, if you will, for the CEO of one of the hedge funds. That I ultimately left the banking for the hedge fund world. Hedge funds were blowing up at the time. So
Yeah.
this was like 1998, 1997. And it was just, I knew I also worked for a woman CEO of a banking trade association, which was very rare. And so I learned so much watching how cool she was, how even keeled she was. And she also had, she basically was running for 100 CEO men who all, were giving her their input, and how she handled it was phenomenal. So I learned just by sitting outside her office how she dealt with conflict. It was such an education to be with another woman in a leadership role. It was
That's
quite
a
fun.
great question to ask. I mean, you as somebody who's teaching people how to trade, there is a difference between men and women, right? In trading, is there is it just the environment? Is it how they trade? Is it internal? Is it their soul? Like how they trade
Yep.
differently?
Yep. Let me clarify that I'm teaching them how to handle their emotions. I'm not teaching them how to trade,
Right.
but the emotional side for women is very different. John Coates has an incredible book called The Hour Between Dog and Wolf. He has 2 studies, in fact, where he really speaks to how women's ability to stay more neutral and not have their ego get pulled into their trades as quickly as it happens for men. Men are definitely built with more testosterone, and that can at times influence how they trade. So John Coates speaks at length about how women do have an edge when it comes to trading because of just the way they're hormonally built. But if anything today with men, I'm seeing lots of trends that men are having lower numbers of their testosterone than ever before. It's not really clear why that's the case, but those low testosterone levels can impact their ability to trade. I partnered with Marek Health, in fact, to do lab work on every trader that I work with, because I can see, Coates even did a study where he checked traders' testosterone levels every morning, and he was able to predict profitability for them that day based on those numbers. So these numbers are very important, and I feel that is a lot
So
of the
higher testosterone means what?
profitability. But
Profitability.
too high can mean self-sabotage because you become to feel like you're a master of the universe. So when you have lots of wins in a row, that's going to raise testosterone for a man. And he is then going to potentially think he's invincible. And that's what he was a derivatives trader at Goldman, and then he became a neuroscientist, and he saw such erratic behavior in himself, never mind his colleagues. And so he wanted to study and better understand how even booms and busts are happening because it's happening across everybody's laptop at once, that sense of invincibility or this sense of fear and panic. So that his book is a life changer. I read it 12 years ago. I've been trying to have him on my podcast forever because he has done the studies that show that physiology really does impact us, men or women, when we're trading, when we're in high stakes situations.
Yeah, and so let's talk about that just for a minute, and then I'll let you go. But when you think about the traders today, men and women, there are a lot more men still trading than women, right?
100%, 100%.
What attracts women to the world of finance that guys are automatically attracted to? Like, oh, money and power, I get that, but what makes women want to go? Ooh, I can't wait to be on the floor. I can't wait to be a trader.
I think it's going to usually be a woman who had somebody close to them that spoke about it being an alternative way to move forward. That ability now, especially that one can trade from home, that one can do it while they still have other responsibilities. I think we can still agree that women are, for the most part, the caretakers, if not of the kids, of even the elderly parents. So that sense of being able to have the flexibility, I think, is one of the appeals. But likely, they are probably a bit more of an independent spirit, where they're more willing to go into a male-dominated industry than maybe some other women would feel comfortable.
And I have to ask, I mean, you and I have seen, we've got war stories, and I can't wait to talk about those in the future episodes here. But give us a war story from those days in 08. I think you and I also went through the .com bubble.
Yeah.
But for me, I think a lot of people want to know, especially new traders today, what it was like during the big one, right? 08 financial crisis. How was that for you?
Well, I had just started my coaching practice in 2006. So what I was seeing was the lack of business. And I was panic stricken because I was making really great money when I was in finance. And now I was an entrepreneur. So what I decided to do was take it into my own hands. And I thought, well, if I'm born to coach, I'm going to just start coaching outside the stock exchange. And that's what I did. I set up a little bench with a sign that said the coach is in, and I started to do 20-minute sessions because a lot of guys on the trading floor had just gotten fired, and they were like in shock. They come out of that building with their little box, and they didn't even know what to do next because that's all they had ever known. So that was one of my war stories, which is how the Wall Street Coach got born. I just sat out there for 1 year on Wednesdays, almost every Wednesday, and just coached people right there in the moment. And it was good for me to see how, when there's a crisis afoot, when you feel like, oh my God, your whole world has crumbled, how does one pick oneself up? And giving people those tools during a really difficult time just even more enrolled me in me wanting to do this full time.
Well, Kim and Curtin, the Wall Street Coach, I really appreciate coming on the show, Quasar Markets Live here. And I tell you, I look forward to a lot of the new episodes and the war stories. And look, how do people get a hold of you?
I would say go to thewallstreetcoach.com, or we put up a link here about how to work with me. So I would say click on that link, and then we can always set up a call and see if what I have in my toolbox is a match for you.
Very good. Thank you, Kim, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much, Steve.